The interesting thing I look back is I always knew my dad loved me, but I don't ever remember him saying the words "I love you" until I became an adult. I remember one of my first toys as a kid that I can remember was a little tool set. You couldn't build much with it, but I could imitate and do what my dad was doing. And, he always had scrap lumber and things, and he just let us, run free with it and encouraged us and showed us and taught us. And
what you would consider the biggest achievement of your life?
Wow. I mean, I would have to say it's probably having kids. Once a father, always a father. We're not as bad as you think we are.
Welcome to another episode of Father's Influence. My special guest today is Aaron. And as usual, we're going to talk about fatherhood. I will ask you about your experience as a son with your father. And I know that you are a father yourself and your experience as a father, like two different roles, son and father. And to begin with, I'm asking you to introduce yourself to those who will be watching this video, so they will, at the beginning of the interview, they will have right away kind of like impression who this person is. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
As you said, my name's Aaron. I grew up in Michigan. I lived there through high school and came down to Tennessee when I went to college and ended up just setting roots here. I work at McKee Foods, and I've been there for 31 years, so
wow.
very established there. So, as you mentioned, I'm a father, so I have three boys. My likes and interests are anything pretty much outside, hiking, camping, backpacking, and I do also like weightlifting. So I try to keep active doing that, and mountain biking. So just stuff that keeps me moving. And hobby of mine is helping people. So I'm a part of a men's ministry group, and we just randomly pick people in our community, in our church, and other churches, and if they have a need, we try to fill that need, usually in something to, just straightening up their property, doing some kind of construction work, repairing, that kind of thing. So I really enjoy that, and I'm very active in my church. I've grown up as a Christian, and church has been in my life as far back as I can remember. So God has always been a very key part of my life.
So if I could say you are a son of your earthly father and you are a son of your heavenly father.
Very much so. Very much so.
Those who will be watching us will be more familiar with you. What you would consider the biggest achievement of your life?
Wow. I mean, I would have to say it's probably having kids. It's you kind of can't compare anything else to that. The good, the bad, the ugly, the ups and downs, it's all part of it. But having someone in your life that is a part of you and, growing up and hopefully for many years to come. So I would say that's probably something I'd put way up there high. My devotion to God is very important to me. So, that's, again, part of who I am. So mesh those two things together, and hopefully I hopefully I did well. My kids are all grown now, but I still have some influence on them, and kind of do a little bit of full circle, and you're with them a lot, and then they kind of move their separate way, and then they kind of start coming back a little bit. So
do you think it will be at some point in your life when you will stop being father for them?
I hope not.
Yeah.
As I've always, as a father, kind of let them make their own decisions. Obviously you got to influence, and there's times where jumping in was important, but sometimes it's good to back up. So especially as they got older, once they hit the late teens and are in high school, I think it's important to let them start making those decisions. So always there, and I hope that they always knew I was there for them, but sometimes you just had to let them kind of do their thing, and I think that that independence is a good thing to teach them. So
if you want to share with us, what was the biggest regret of your life? Biggest
regret? I always wished I had joined the military. That may surprise some, and I guess those who don't know me, but it's just something that I wish I had done. I guess just that camaraderie, that serving my country. Should have done it when I was really young, and then you have kids, and I know that's not really an excuse, because a lot of people, a lot of our servicemen and women, have families, but life just gets away from you. And then when you start looking back at it, before too long, you're too old. And
any specific area?
I probably joined the Marines. It's always been I have full respect for all our servicemen and women in all the branches, but the Marines have just been always kind of I've got some really good friends that, that was their branch, and just something about them. I don't know, maybe just the uniform, who knows? But that was just the one that appealed to me the most.
I think at this moment, I have a feeling, and I'm called to say thank you to those who served to this country. We want to say thank you for all the years, days, minutes, and sometimes seconds that you dedicated with your life to serve for freedom of this country. You mentioned a little bit about your role as a father, but let's talk a little bit about your role as a son.
Okay.
Maybe not so much a role, but your experience as a son with your father. Right away, I want to ask, is your father still around?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Still.
Yep, I'm very blessed to have both my parents.
If you can recall the earliest memory that you have with your father, what is it?
I have a lot of memories of that old house that I have to put together, and it was just, my dad would bring home little gifts and trinkets and stuff from work, and I remember all of us. I have 3 siblings, so all 4 of us, he'd come home, we'd go run in the door, and he'd come in, and wait for our turn for him to pick us up, and give us a hug, and I think back, it's like, wow, I remember that fondly and vividly, but I was very, very young, so that obviously stuck with me, when I think about, I remember that I was probably 3 or 4 years old, and to think back, how old I am now, to recall some of that, but that obviously made an impression on me. So just always there.
Very powerful. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you right away, I'm recording an interview with different people, and there's obviously different experiences of fatherhood. But just this moment, the earliest moment that you shared, that you have a memory where you was waiting when your father would come in to jump and hug with him and get this bonding reconnection with him. So it's saying that you had a very good relationship with your father.
I do, and the funny thing is now the roles are reversed, so he gets that same excitement when I go to see him.
All right, tell us a little bit more.
I mean, they live close by, fortunately. I mean, they're an hour away, so it's not, right next. I don't get to see him every day, but they're always, when you coming up? When are you going to come see? So they get very excited, and it's just little things. I mean, it doesn't seem as significant, and as they've gotten older, I start realizing I need to enjoy every minute I have with them. But when I go up to see them, they're standing at the door waiting for me to come in and give me hugs, where I remember when I was a little child, it was the other way around. And so it's kind of a, just something that's special for me, to see how excited they are to see me when I had that same excitement to see them.
Roles are reversed.
Yes.
Interesting.
And becoming more the caretaker and helping them out. So, I mean, all that just starts shifting, and it's, you think about all the things they did for me, and I keep saying I know we're talking fatherhood, but, my mom's still alive too, but the stuff that both of them, the influence they had on me, to be able to return that love and be able to help them. And it's the little things. That's kind of what's weird. It's like, as a kid, everything's a big, huge thing, and you think it's great, and they're probably thinking, that wasn't that significant, but, the little tiny stuff I do for them, they get all excited. Thank you so much for doing this for me. And it's like, it really wasn't that big a deal. But it's just, it's to see that reversal and that same interaction coming from the other side of it.
Do you think it's a common practice that roles are usually reversed? So in other words, if we could say, you will reap what you sow.
I would hope that's the way it is. I mean, as you mentioned, just hearing me, I'm very blessed. My parents, we have a great relationship. My siblings and I have a great relationship. So I hear my friends, and it's like that family dynamic wasn't always the same. Mm-hmm.
How you would describe your father's parenting style?
I would actually say that my mom was probably more the disciplinarian, more the, she was a stay-at-home mom for a good part of especially my early years. Mm-hmm. So, that it just seemed like there was more interaction there. But, from my dad's side, I just knew he even though he was at work, I valued every minute I had when he was at home. Mm-hmm. And, it would usually, while he was very, very busy, he was always trying to incorporate us kids into whatever he was doing. Just having that bond and that time together.
If you will think about his parenting style,
Okay,
particularly your father,
Okay.
what he was authoritative, he was very loving and kind, he was very forgiving. What was the main, like if you could summarize his style of parenting with you and maybe with your siblings as well?
He was much more the quiet, but even now it's kind of the same way. But when he spoke, you listened. You know, when he started talking, you knew he was, you know, meant business. If he was, but always his parenting style was more nurturing. You know, like teaching, and you know, he was a carpenter and just very hands-on. You know, and he passed that skills on. So not so much the authoritarian. The interesting thing I look back is I always knew my dad loved me, but I don't ever remember him saying the words "I love you" until I became an adult. And I didn't put that connection together until the last year or two. You know, and I've been more deliberate about making sure I tell them I love. You know, with my mom, I guess it was more easy. With the dad, the words just weren't always there, but it never made me feel awkward or unloved or anything. So it's like those words weren't necessary, but now that we're saying them more, it is meaningful and it's important. But I don't feel like that I missed out. As you know, like I said, I don't feel like there wasn't that. Oh, my dad doesn't love me. He never says it. I never thought about it because his actions always portrayed it.
So I was going to ask you, why did you feel that he always loved you? And you said about his actions. Can you recall, or can you give us a couple examples, particular actions that you remember that strike you or affirm you that even without his words, he loved you and he loves you?
Just his patience in teaching us stuff. Like I said, mentioned I can remember the youngest age, him always building or tinkering or working on something, being right there. I remember one of my first toys as a kid that I can remember was a little tool set. You couldn't build much with it, but I could imitate and do what my dad was doing. And, he always had scrap lumber and things, and he just let us, run free with it and encouraged us and showed us and taught us. And, like I said, that more the hands-on nurturing and teaching, and just when he was there, he was present, so it wasn't, like I said, he was, when he was at work, he's not around, but when he was home, even when he was working, you always, he was present. So if you had a question, you had something that you needed, he was there. He wasn't an absentee father. He wasn't a distanced father. He was busy and very hardworking, and he had lots of things, responsibilities, both at home and church and different things. But if we needed something, I never felt like I was, taking second place to something else.
If I can paraphrase it and to summarize, probably what I'm hearing, you feel that you are loved because the way how he was teaching you any skills with his active involvement, and he was doing it in a loving and kind manner. He didn't need to say that he loved you, but the way how he was teaching you was expressing to you more than words.
Yes, very much so. Like I said, I didn't even think about that until more recently in the last year or two, that I just don't remember those words either way. I could say the same thing. I don't remember, as a little tiny kid, but as getting older, I never wasn't our practice. And now that we're doing it more, it's like, it kind of feels good, But like I said, I didn't feel like I was missing it. So
were there any specific values or lessons your father influenced in your life?
Work ethic, I would say very much so. I mean, when I moved out of the city, we went to an old 100-year-old farmhouse. We bought a bunch of land. My parents wanted to get us out of the city and get us, out away from some of the influences. And it was, we had a nice house in the city, it was nice and comfortable and warm. And we move out, no insulation, no, heating and air. And so he was always working on the house and always doing, something, so he was always busy. I mean, he didn't have much downtime, but like I said, he always made time for us. There were activities and things that he always made time for us special, but all those other times we were happy. For the most part, most kids don't like chores and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know how that goes. But there was a lot of other things that were very fun. Getting to learn how to work on a house and demolition it as a 6-year-old, give him a hammer and tell him to knock down a wall. That's exciting and fun, and he, like I said, and he was letting us do that. We were able to participate with him, at whatever level we could do. So, he didn't put us second fiddle. He tried to incorporate us into that and teach us that, you want something done, you want to get something accomplished, you put the effort into it and, it'll pay off. So just that drive to, you see something needs done, you just go do it.
If you remember maybe a specific example, when you mess up, what he would do, how he would address it while he was teaching you some work ethic and to do things right. But if you will mess up, how he would teach you or train you to do things right.
I didn't have a lot of issues. I was kind of a conformist as a kid. I'm not saying I didn't mess up and didn't do. So for me, it wasn't as big a deal as like maybe my younger brother. But, he had more consequences given to him, where I'm thinking more back that it was, you could tell if he was upset and you could tell if he was disappointed, not necessarily big, punishments, whether, spanking or grounding or taking something away. It was more just, I do remember him more being explaining, especially like misusing his tools or not putting them away, that kind of thing, so that, like I said, he was always very gracious to let us use them. But if we didn't use them the right way or didn't put them back, he'd get on to us for why I may or may not have done that, but he also explained why. Okay, that tool's not for that. You do that, it's either dangerous or you could break it or you could get hurt. If you don't put it away, I can't find it. And then if I need it, or you leave it outside, it gets rained on. So there was usually more of an explanation of, hey, this is what you did. It's not so much, hey, you screwed up. Come on, son, get it together. It was more, you could tell he wasn't happy about it, but he just didn't ever come unhinged or unglued about, that I remember, at least with me.
What was the most influential your father did that influenced you, the person you are today?
I would say that, like I said, he was very busy and had a lot of stuff to do, but he made sure he made time for us kids. That's something that I have, that same drive and work ethic, but I always tried to pull my sons in and keep them either with me and working on something with me, or making sure I took time just, a busy afternoon, hey, let's go swimming. Okay. I remember my, dad going, we had a swimming hole not too far from us, and our neighbors, one of their farms had a pond, and, he'd come out there swimming with us, and just hanging out, he'd take away, knowing he was very busy, had stuff, something had to be done, but, he would carve out time. Sometimes you always wish it was more.
Yes.
But at the same time, I realized, you can't stop life. So those things have to happen, but he made that effort to try to have a balance. So that's, I guess, something that I have tried to do with my kids, is make sure that they knew I was important, and hey, I can set some time aside and not feel like I'm making time for you, that I want to have time with you.
Spending good quality time.
Yep.
What some of the challenges from your perspective your father faced as a parent?
We didn't grow up with a lot, so just knowing how much he worked for how little we had, and just trying to figure out how to make it all come together and work. I realized the sacrifice and how much, especially as we went to college, how much, they had to, they pitched in and helped, knowing that they didn't have, and it's sometimes little things, just, it's like, that may have not have seemed like that big a deal as a kid, because all the other kids had this or whatever. But when you got something, you knew that, at least for me, I knew that if I got a present or a gift, it was a sacrifice. It wasn't because we had extra money just laying around and I'm just going to lavish this on you because I have it. It was, when you got something, you knew they had, that money was saved and put aside. So it made it that much more special. And I remember that as a young kid. It wasn't something I thought of later as an adult. I mean, I knew that sacrifice was there for him, and he put aside things that he might have needed that money for something else to do.
It sounds like the relationship with your father very secure and very firm.
Yes.
And stable.
Yes.
Do you know anything about relationship of your father with his father or with your grandfather?
He always talks of him fondly. He passed away when there's a picture of my grandfather holding me when I was less than a year old. So I mean, that's so I never knew him. He died suddenly. So the memories he shares are good ones. The stuff he remembers about his dad, he doesn't, I know there was some family issues, there's always something in every family that he, had to deal with, but I think he had a good relationship. What I hear is, I think, kind of the way it was for him and me. There's responsibility, this thing to do, but Dad made the time for us, or he was always there, or I didn't feel like he was gone. I've not gotten that sense, so I feel that maybe that was how he was raised, and that's, the characteristics that I've seen in him. So at least that's how I like to think about it. Mm-hmm. Like I said, not knowing him and not knowing a lot about him, I put that positive spin and.
The way how your father presented his relationship with his father seems like he was passing to you what he got from his father.
That's the best I can put together. Mm-hmm. Not having, a lot of information, but that's kind of my conclusion anyways. He's teaching me the same way he was taught. Or taught me the same way he was taught. So it gives me a vision into my grandfather. I guess maybe that's why I put that relationship, is it allows me to know him a little bit, even though I never did.
Now if we will switch toward you as a father.
All right.
3 boys.
3 boys.
That's tough.
All grown, all adults now.
It's easier.
It is easier, yes.
But if we will go back to the beginning.
All right.
When you got your first son. Do you remember this moment?
I do.
Did you go to the delivery?
I did not go into the delivery, but I was there. Uh-huh. I guess I did the first child, the more traditional. I wasn't sure I was ready to be in there. Let's put it that way. Uh-huh. But I was there. I remember he was born in the morning, and they put a hospital smock gown thing on me, and when they did his footprints, they put footprints on and I still have that shirt. When it was all over, of course, when you're having a newborn, they take the baby away, and, they're doing all their things and making sure everything's all right. And my wife was like, I'm going to bed. She was exhausted. So I was like, okay, what do I do? Just sit in the room? So I was excited. So I went back to work, and I wore my shirt into the office that had my footprints on it. So, the first one was, not that any of the rest aren't special, but that first one is like, wow. So,
what did you feel? If you can recall the feelings, emotions at this moment when you got to hold your firstborn.
That's a feeling you can't repeat anywhere else, I guess. I mean, it's just, this life is part of you, and it's a piece of you now. This is where your life's going to go, is revolving around this little football here. So I probably, if I thought deep, I could probably recite it from memory, but I wrote I'm not a poet in any form or fashion. And I remember sitting down one day, and the words just started coming to my head, and I wrote a poem for my firstborn.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you recite it?
I sit up at night and watch you sleep, peacefully lying in a contorted heap. I didn't think you would ever tire, as quietly you nurse your pacifier. Watching you, I fill with pride. My love for you I cannot hide. The thoughts and feelings in my head, as close you snuggle to me in bed. Words cannot express the way I feel. While next to you I watchfully kneel. You reach out to me and I hand a toy, this little one I lovingly call the boy. You run in circles with a great big smile, then stumble and fall in a little pile. You look at me and raise your hand as if to say, please help me stand. As you get older and begin to grow, there are several things I want you to know. Throughout your life, I'll do all I can, for you are my son, my little man. Through heartache, sorrow, happiness, and fun, I'll always be there for you, my son. Wherever you go and whatever you do, always know that Daddy loves you. And like I said, it was a one and done. I've never had that inspiration. It just kind of came. I mean, I would just start writing, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is, it just kept flowing. And actually what's hanging on my wall, my mom had printed it out in a nice paper and had it had a silhouette of a little boy swinging and had framed it for me. So like I said, I've got that hanging in my bedroom. He's read it, and I'd like to, someday I'm going to make sure I share that with him again, and just so he knows that, just because he'll be 30 this year, so that's my so it's been a while, and just to know that that means as much today as it did 30 years ago.
What kind of father you are? How you would describe yourself?
I would say in a lot of respects, very much like my dad. It's a question that would be interesting for you to ask my kids and find out what they say. I tried to always be there for them, involved in their activities, make sure that, again, that they knew that I loved them. I think as little kids that, they never had that doubt. We got along, we're great. I would say especially my middle son, the teen years were pretty rough. And then later on, when my wife and I divorced, my older son didn't talk to me for several years. So look back, it's like, what did I do wrong? What did I do? What could have I done different? Was it what I did? And I've had to come find a realization. I remember writing a letter to each of my kids, apologizing for what I may or may not have done, trying to understand their feelings and their, where they might be, and just let them know that, no matter what happens, I'll always, love them and I'm there for them. Things are getting better, which is good. I try not to look back and say, well, I screwed up here. I screwed up. I should have done this. I should have done that. I'd like to say there's not a book on how to be a parent. Well, there's hundreds of books probably how to be a parent, but at the same time, you have to live it. You can get advice, you can get things, that little snippets that, this is helpful, this is good, but you're a young adult. You're just now entering you're an infant adult.
Yes. And
now you have an infant child. So there's just a lot of, you're growing and learning as you go. And, you do, everybody, myself including, you do the best you can. And you look back and think about where I screwed up. And it's like, you can't do that.
I have a couple questions. First is, when you got your first boy and then when you got your second one, did you talk to your father about, hey, Dad, how should I deal with this situation with my boys? Or how should I do with that? Did you ask for his counsel?
Now, I never thought about that, but now that you ask me, I guess probably not anything specific. I just tried to be like he was. I think without asking anything specific, it was like, this is how Dad did it. This is how it's supposed to be done because this is how my dad did it. So, but drew on his parenting style even without realizing it more than, I thought at the time.
You mentioned about the divorce. Would you be willing to share a little bit about this part of your life, specifically how it influenced your boys? You mentioned that the middle one, it was hard on him.
I don't know if the divorce particularly was as hard on him. The older one, like I said, he estranged himself from me for several years. And
after the divorce.
I'm not sure the specifics as to why. He had some kind of resentment. We're making in the last year, some good strides, and I think we're at a much, much better place where at least, we can hang out and talk. I just had lunch with him a couple weeks ago. So, that's, whereas 2 years ago, he didn't want to be in the same room as me, kind of thing. My middle son, like I said, during the teen years, late middle school, high school, a lot of animosity. I don't know where and why. The divorce, he actually was probably, I would say, the more neutral. He didn't try to take sides. He tried, he would hear from both. And I did my best to keep them out of the divorce, not sharing stuff and venting and, tried to keep it as neutral. So they just knew that, what's going on between us, even though it affects them, it doesn't change how I feel about them, kind of thing. And then the youngest, he forged his own way. He still has, loves both of us equally. And I don't think he didn't pick sides or he also stayed much more neutral, lived with her for a while. And then when I was able to get a place, moved in with me. So he's lived with me for the last couple of years, but still, Hank goes to see his mom and they get together. And, fortunately we're both in a good place where, during the summer, my youngest plays a lot of summer ball and softball. So we're both up every game pretty much, so when we can sit together and talk and, so took a couple years, but it's good because they see that. And I think that's helped smooth things over. And they know that, well, when I go over to, see mom, she's going to talk bad about dad. And when I'm with dad, he's going to, there's not that. So, we have a great relationship, which is how I hoped it would be. Just for whatever reason that the marriage part didn't work out, but,
yes.
But we're there as parents for the kids, the boys.
So before the divorce, when you start talking with your wife about divorce, did you talk to your boys that, hey guys, that's what going to happen?
I actually did. I don't know if that was the best thing or the not. Again, I don't go back and second guess, but I actually talked to them first. Mm-hmm. And if they would have been, 8, 9, 10.
How old they were? I was going to ask if you
The older boys would have been, well, my youngest was his senior year of high school. Mm-hmm. And then he's 5 years younger than his next brother and 7. So, I mean, say he was 17, 18, so they'd have been, 23, 25. So they were adults. They were grown. Yeah, so we still all lived together, but they were adults. So I treat, like I said, as I mentioned before earlier, that I always treated them as adults. And I thought, I wouldn't have gone to them as 10-year-olds and said, hey, your mom and I are getting together. I would have talked to her first. But since they were adults, I felt like, I can treat them as adults and I can talk to them and get their perspective and just let them know, hey, what are you seeing? And they weren't, I got different answers for each of them, but I think if they look back, they're like, yeah, this isn't what a relationship's supposed to be. I think they could see that, it wasn't working. Mm-hmm. So, I could have that conversation with them and felt comfortable with it and didn't feel anything. It feel like I was doing the wrong thing mm-hmm. or, subjecting them to something, that they were too young for.
You mentioned about the letters, 3 of them, and they had different perspectives. After the divorce, got it, and he was still equally loving both of you. Your middle one, what was his perspective on the divorce?
He was more, like I said, the 2 younger ones were definitely more neutral. Uh-huh. They saw they weren't, it's not anything any kid wants to hear, whether they're adult or young, yes. But, they were old enough to understand and see and, go through it. Like I said, the older one, for whatever reason, had his issues that he may never share them with me. And that's not important, as long as we can form a relation. But I was at a point in my life where I was like, I can't keep looking back and what did I do wrong? What, yes. What should I, you can't change any of that. So I just wanted to make sure that whatever I made, because they didn't share if I had done something wrong. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to make sure they understood how I felt, exactly. That I loved them. And, if I ever had done anything or said anything to hurt them, it was never intentional. And that, I did my best as a father to try to, be a good example, be there for them. And I just at this point, again, they're adults. So again, it would have been different for your younger kid, but it's like, they can make that decision. I'm mm-hmm. like, I put it back on them. It's like, if you want to hang out with me and you want to spend time with me, I'm here open arms. Mm-hmm. But if you don't, I respect your decision. It's your decision and I can't change that. Mm-hmm. So, I always would send, text reminders, and just things, hey, thinking about you and that kind of stuff. So I wasn't detaching myself exactly. from their life, but I wasn't right. I was respecting that distance and I wasn't chasing them and hounding them and calling them constantly. It's like, giving them their space and letting them have that healing time as well. And, mm-hmm. They just knew where I stood. And like I said, it was in their ball court at that point in time.
But you're saying that you were still reminding them, hey,
yep.
I'm not it was not just a year ago that I told you that I'm available. I'm still available.
Right.
What influenced you to write this letter? And if you can tell us a little bit more about the letter that you wrote or the letters. Did you write a letter to each one of them?
It was very much the same. I addressed it to each one of them, mm-hmm. but I didn't have anything specific that I was like, okay, this is for you. This is, mm-hmm. I'll be honest, it was a form letter, so to speak. I mean, I wrote it with my heart, but I gave each one of them a copy. And like I said, it just kind of explained,
your feelings,
my feelings for them and, apologizing for something that, if they were upset with something, I don't know what it is. I can't do anything about it. So I wanted, it's like, if there's something I've done or said, I'm truly sorry. And I, don't want that to come between us. And it was never meant the way you may or may not have taken it. And just, explain that to them the best I could. I actually received a response from my middle son pretty much right away. Mm-hmm. It was very positive and, we get along great now. We get along better than we did, back when he was, like I said, those teen years. Mm-hmm. it's great because he'll actually text me now. Neither my two older boys are real big communicators. They're quiet into themselves, and I understand that. So again, I give them that respect, and we have the conversations when we're together and text. But my middle one will, hey Dad, I was listening to this song, and I remember when we used to play it as a kid, and there's, just little stuff, made me think about you, and, so makes you feel good, try not to cry when I say that. The younger one, he didn't say anything for a while, but then, we were having a conversation one night, and he brought it up, and he was, told me how much he appreciated that.
The letter.
The letter, and that he doesn't have anything. I felt I was on good terms with him. I never felt like there was a wedge between us, but I wanted to make sure, that all three of them understood, and just to make sure. Like I said, the older one never addressed the letter, but his mom and my other son made sure that he read it, because I mailed it to him, and made sure that, he didn't just stick it in a cupboard. So they were supportive of it. And, my ex didn't know what was in it, but I guess my other son had probably mentioned it to her. So she knew, and it's like, you need to read this, make sure, which is good. Made me feel good. Because again, there was never anything that I feel like she was doing to try to drive them away, any of them away from me. So during the divorce and the heat of the moment, and, emotions flying, you think all the wild things, and, what is she saying and all that stuff. But I look back and I'm like, I don't think that happened, which is, I'm going to make that assumption. And like I said, where we're at in our relationship and where I'm at with my boys' relationship, it's a plausible, or at least a likely rational conclusion.
If you're willing to share, how long this distance or detachment last with your older son?
I don't think I had communication probably for the first 2 years after the divorce. And even during, I know there was one incident that I know you tell he was upset, didn't talk to me at all. The rest of my family, relatives and stuff, he was fine with. So, if we had a Christmas get together, Thanksgiving get together, he would make an effort to show up, but I was under clear instructions that I wasn't to talk to him. I'll come, but
so you could stay in one room, kind of like.
Yeah, pretty much. Break. Well, out of respect, I didn't try to approach him. He did not want. First he didn't want me to be there, and I'll come to the Christmas dinner if you're not there. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, this is my family. I'm not going to say I'm not going to go, but if you don't want me to, and I had to communicate through his brother. So that's, hey, love to have you there, but if you want me to stay away from you, I'll do that. So, we could be in the same house, and, but there was no conversation directed towards him. I gave him a space, and it slowly would be that we could have a multiple person conversation where he may or may not address me, and it just kind of progressed, a little bit more and more, and eased into it.
How did you feel? Do you remember the feelings of this detachment with him? What was your feelings?
It's a hard pill to swallow. It's, this is your son, and he doesn't want anything to do with you. And not knowing what I did, and thinking that all the years prior to the divorce that, I devoted in the thing, I'm second guessing, I did this. I was always made sure, I was like, I felt like I was there and doing things. So what happened that he was willing to erase all that? Let one thing, which again, obviously affected him, but at the same time, it shouldn't have had that. I wouldn't have thought it had that effect on our relationship. And I think after a while, it just became easy, became, complacent. That's the norm. So I don't know if he thought too much of it. And, with prodding from other family members and trying to encourage him. And, I remember the big breakthrough was his, mom was having a birthday. They were just going out to eat for his birthday. And she had asked him if he wanted me to come along. And he said, yeah, I can come. So, we sat as a family, even though my wife and I, we were divorced. We sat together. And again, for the boys, that's good. That's hopefully the relationship they can have. And so I think that was probably the first big icebreaker. And then, the next time, hey, let's go out to eat. It was just, me and the boys, and he's like, okay, so we could sit down and have it. Now it's it's not a pulling teeth thing. If hey, let's go get something to eat. If he's available, he'll come eat. And he recently bought a car, his first, brand new. His mom said, I think you need to take your dad with you. So and I think he was fine. I think he was nervous doing it by himself, but he was fine with me. We spent 5 hours at a car dealership, and we're just talking and chatting, and he'd look at me and ask questions. I'm like, this is yours. This is your decision. I respect it. Let's talk about and make sure if there's something you're unclear about or you're uncomfortable. I said, but if you think you can handle this and do this, this is, again, putting that responsibility, trying, he'll let someone do something for him if he doesn't have to do it. But I wanted to, I was excited to be there as I'm here with my son who doesn't didn't want anything to do with me a couple years ago, and we're having this moment where we're working together, but I didn't want to pull anything away from him. I guess the father kicked in. It's like, this is a big decision, and it needs to be your decision. If you're not comfortable with it, so we can walk away. Or if this is what you're comfortable with, so let's go for it. And made him. I tried to be back to make sure he just something didn't get pulled past him or he didn't understand. And, so it's just kind of try to be more of a safety net just and let him do the interaction with, the salesman, which is not his comfort zone. But, he did great, and I think I'd like to think because I was sitting there next to him, that might have made him feel comfortable.
So now looking back, you realizing and probably admitting that you made a proper approach to let him go, to make his decision to be distant from you, but at the same time reminding him that, hey, I'm available, I'm still willing to reconnect, but I respect your choice. How long it took from the day he distanced from you and now the day when you went to eat? What is the time frame?
I mean, we're probably from the time he quit talking to me till then. I mean, we're probably we're at the 4-year mark.
4 years.
So, I mean, 2 years of total radiant silent, there's nothing. And then it was just the slowly, hey, we can get together to, okay, I'll talk to you to, I'm okay to say hi and to, actually going out. Is it all I hope it will be? Again, knowing his personality, I'll take everybody I can get. He's just knowing who he is. It's like, okay, for him, this is a big deal. I'll take it for what it is.
I hear that it's a big deal for you too.
Yeah. Oh yes, for sure. I mean, like I said, I came to the peace with it after I wrote the letter and realized, I can't change what they think.
Exactly.
That's not my power to do. They're going to have to, and again, they were all in different stages, but it's like, these are things that they have to decide as grown men. Mm-hmm. Maybe putting that on to them was a good thing too, where they're, they had to man up, okay, I'm going to choose to be this or choose to do this or whatever. But that gave me at least the peace.
Yes.
And, it could have still gone on for years. I didn't know at that point, what it was, where it was going to go and, was it going to be a positive thing or backfire on me? And, I think it broke some ice.
If I can summarize what you did is when someone whom you love tremendously distanced himself from you, it was very hard and painful for you. You start digging yourself, trying to find what you did wrong. And when you couldn't figure out, you came to the idea that you need to write a letter and respect his choice, but at the same time, reveal yourself, where you stand. And when you wrote this letter, you start feeling peace that at least you did your part and he knows where you stand. And now it's up to him to decide what he wants to do with it. Now, after a couple of years, we see some good result. I want to ask if you can give advice to a father, to a man who's going through divorce and having his children. What advice you would give to this man in terms of approach relationship with his children when he's facing the divorce?
I would say you just have to show them that unconditional love. And that's saying those words may not have a lot of meaning or may have meaning depending on who's receiving this. But what I mean by that is you have to live it, you have to say it, you have to show it. I mean, you can't, they need to know at all times that they're important in your life and that they're important enough to make time for in your life. They're not an afterthought. Oh, if I can squeeze it in, I can think it, I can get it. I'm seeing that more as seeing my parents aging and some of that role reversal that we were talking about and having that. It's like how important it is. It's like when I'm in my 80s, I hope my kids want to come see me. And I feel guilty I don't go see my parents more often. I mean, they've always been very understanding. You guys have your lives. I mean, we don't want to get in the way. We'd love to see you anytime you can. But how important that I'm still their son. I mean, they still have that love for me, and they have that same respect and that same, we understand where you're at, but that doesn't change where I'm always there for you. Even if you can't make time for me, I'm always going to make time for you. And, it's just, they need to not just hear it, they need to feel it and they need to see it. So, I mean, it's that three-part, you can say I love you all you want, but if the words aren't followed by actions, it's meaningless, or you can, like I said, looking back, not hearing those words, I felt it enough, even though I didn't hear it. Now that I'm hearing it more, it's like, that's kind of cool to get that, never felt like I wasn't loved, but on top, right. It's just, you realize, oh, that's just cool. It's like I never felt anything missing until I had that little piece. And it's like, it feels good, so expressing that, making sure, that, you say those words, but you back it up with, actions.
Thank you. What is the biggest challenge for you as a father?
Right now, just hoping I did the best I could. I mean, as I mentioned, my kids are all adults and, spreading their wings and doing their own thing and just letting them go. My youngest just graduated college, and he's talking about he's got his degree, a PTA degree, physical therapy assistant, passed his boards, and he's job hunting right now. And one of his exciting prospects is possibly doing as a travel, PTA, because he's always wanted to go somewhere different, just be on his own. I think he's anxious to kind of try that, and this would be a great time for him. So it's like, hopefully I've taught them and showed them, and I still, unfortunately, a lot of times the phone calls I get, it's usually most of the time they need something. And as a dad, that, I'll take it, I'm like, hey, they know if something happens, they can still call me. But like I said, I like getting those texts from my middle son where it's like, hey, Dad, just thinking about you. And it's like, so it's not because I need something, it's because I'm just thinking about you. So, so just hoping that I've passed on enough knowledge and enough that, they can do it on their own. You may experiences with your kids that, you tell them to do something and, it can be like pulling teeth. But, I mentioned my dad, had a high work ethic, and just something needed done, he'd do it and, make sure it got taken care of. I had that. And I think, tried to demonstrate that to my kids, so I was always busy doing something and, getting them to put their laundry away or do the dishes was like the end of the world. But it's nice to hear from people who they've worked for or with how good of workers they are. So it's like, okay, I get it. It's harder to do it for parents and you're, because they're asking you and you feel like you're obligated, all that stuff. But to know that they have that same work ethic, they have that they're not, none of them are lazy, they get up and do what they got to do to, make things happen, and the generations have changed. So being able to shift to how I think of things and the time, how they spend their free time and that kind of stuff can be, it's like, you just have to tell yourself, you have to understand, because my parents probably felt the same way. This is, we didn't do that. We didn't, I think my parents' generation and my generation were probably a little bit closer. And, that was before the real digital age, the technical, so I think we see more eye to eye and had more common ground there where it's much more harder where, my kids grew up with, cell phones and, computer games and, different distractions. And, it's their world. That's what they know. And that's how they communicate. That's how they interact. And it's like, I'd rather sit with a friend and talk to them than sit next to them and text them, but that's how they do it. I try to. That's where I have to pull back as a dad, and it's like, you're doing it wrong. No, they're not. They're doing their thing, and I have to respect that. And even if I don't understand it, just like generation to generation, it's always changing. Where there's always something different.
Where is this line then to understand that this is just something age or culture appropriate, or something which is just destructive? Not so much about, yes, about the culture of nowadays, but about destruction of nowadays. And where do you, as a parent, do you see this line? And if you do, how you would address it?
I mean, but as they were younger, like I said, the technology is a big thing. I didn't grow up with computer and video games, so I have no interest in them. There's some fun ones, I've watched them play to try to, and played with them. So I tried, to at least have something, try to get immersed in their world. Mm-hmm. But I always tried to have boundaries as well. It's like, hey, there's more to life out here, and try to introduce them to stuff, and when, the weekends came and stuff, my wife used to work, she did a lot of weekends. So it was just me and the boys. So it's like, we're going to the nature center. We're going to go to the Great Discovery Museum, or we're going to go to, the aquarium, or we're going to go to the pool, trying to get them out, bike riding, whatever, get at least introduce them that there's something else out there. There's more, so take them camping, take them backpacking, whatever. But as I got older, I also, I didn't want to force that on them. So that was the hard part of pulling back. It's like, they know both sides of it. This is their culture and this is mine. Trying to teach them that balance. But as they were getting older, it's like, all I can do is try to live by example and show them other opportunities. Mm-hmm. But it was very clear early on, if I told them, don't do this, this is bad, or, then it was a wedge. Mm-hmm. And so I had to walk kind of a fine line. And it's like, as I mentioned earlier, I tried to teach my kids to make decisions, make good decisions. There's only so much you can do. Yes. And I tried to let them have that as early as was, reasonable. Sometimes intervention's halfway, and sometimes like, dive in, kids, there's consequences for stuff you're choosing to do. And that, like I said, my oldest is still 30, it's almost 30, and he still plays video games, but so do a whole lot of other 30-year-olds. Mm-hmm. I sit in my work office and hear that next generation, and they get together. They're not even in the same room, which, for us, they were introduced when I was young. They were starting to come out, but you had to be in the same room together and play. They're, playing with people in other countries and across the world and next door. And I was like, that's just foreign to me. Mm-hmm. But I had to accept that. That's just the world they live in. And I look at all the negative parts of it. Uh-huh. And at the same time, there are positives, because that's how they make friends. I mean, they have some they have some people they've gamed with for years that they've actually gotten together with in person, and it's like they've known, they may not have seen each other every day, but they talk to each other every day. It's foreign to you and I. Yes. But it's normal for them, and it's life for them, and they're happy.
How did you discipline your boys?
I ashamedly have to say I probably did more yelling than anything. They had their share of groundings, and that, you try everything and try to figure out what's worked. But if I look back, and I mentioned that with my dad, he didn't discipline a lot. Mm-hmm. But like I said, when he spoke, you listened. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't always softly and gently, but it was never hateful or hurtful. It's just, as a kid, it's pretty traumatic, but it was, I didn't ever read more into it. And I guess I probably more of my discipline and I look back and it's like, that probably did a whole lot more damage because it's than good, because of, just how that hits your self-esteem. And so, I try not to sit at night and think about that, because I can't change it. So, that is what it is. And it wasn't probably my proudest part of a father, but my kids are pretty good.
What you would recommend to your young self when you just had 3 boys, but they're still young? What advice you would give to yourself?
Patience. Just pay and not trying to set expectations that are your expectation. Not try to make them be just like you. Let them be themselves. Let them have that space and be more influence to, hopefully lead them in to the good. Something my middle son said to me once was that really hit me and made me think that, boy, I shouldn't have been doing that, is, way to make me want to do something, Dad, by making me do it. And, unfortunately, that was with church. I always made the kids go to church. Never felt like I had to force them, especially when they were little. We'd go to church and they enjoyed, their classes and stuff. But as I got older, things change and that wasn't their thing. And, I still, for a while, I made them, and then it was just grumbling and griping, and it was unpleasant for everybody to go to church. And it's like, and they were old enough. I mean, they were late teens. So, at that point in time, I felt they were old enough. If they want to go to church, I hope they want to go to church. And, I always invited them to church, but if they didn't want to go, making them go was not going to make them want to be there. And, that was, so I can relate that back to even some other things, just like, this is how I always did it, so this is how you have to do it. I always wanted, I was a neat kid. I always had my room clean and organized. Well, that's not normal for kids. It's just, to be honest, it's, that's just not typical. And at some point I had to pull back and said, all right, I'm not going to get on to you. I said, I may say something about your room, but that's your space. So, I don't want dirty dishes, and, I don't want it to become a junkyard. But if you don't put your toys away, that's okay, as long as you keep it in your space and it's not out in the middle of the living room floor or somewhere else. So trying to, and being the neat OCD person, that was hard, but it's like, I can't expect them to be me. I can have influence, but we're all our own person and we're all designed differently, and we won't all be exactly the same. We can see characteristics pass through, but you can't force a lot of that stuff on them. So, just trying to, I wish I'd learned that earlier, to pull back and not have those, this is how I did it, so this is how you have to do it. Because the way they were doing it wasn't necessarily wrong. It just wasn't my way. And that's not learning. That's a hard one for, I would imagine, for any father, just find that balance where you can still have that influence, but let them make the decisions. And you'll find it be a whole lot more peaceful. So I think that would probably be, just learning that patience and that expectation level to be a little bit more balanced.
To add to this question, I think it's good and it's important that we as fathers, we have expectations for our kids, for our children. We want them to be successful. We want them to have good friends. We want them to be good friends for others. We want them to choose right friends. But again, how to make it happen, the approach of it. Yes, we don't want our kids to be in jail. We don't want our kids to use drugs. We don't want them to use alcohol. So we have some expectations, but how we implement these expectations and approach them achieving their life success. To talk about something positive, what is the most rewarding for you as a father?
Just to see them actually making it on their own. All holding down jobs. Some of them gone to school. Some of them just, the older one, he just pretty much went straight to work. But, he's worked at the same place for years and, seems to enjoy it. And he knows that he knows he has to work. So, to see that, there's a lot of people who, his age group that struggle with that, and he's willing to work. And the same thing with my middle son. I know he's got some goals and aspirations, and just, encouraging him to, with his personality, his way of doing things is, just encouraging him to not give up on that. And, with my youngest, he's probably been, he's very focused. He told me one day, he said, Dad, I'm a self-made man. And he acknowledged that he's got pieces of his mom and pieces of me and other people influence, but at the same time, he likes to be able to say that I am who I am because of the choices I made and because of this is how I wanted to be. And I have to respect that. I mean, that's good. And, all three of them have turned out, good in that respect. None of them are super talkative, but when they have stuff, those moments where they'll call me, even the youngest, he lives with me and we chat and joke around and stuff and have a good time. But, every now and then he'll come with that, question of, hey, Dad, and you talked about friends, or he had one that, he felt like kind of betrayed him. Was like, I don't know if I can trust him. I just, he's a good guy, but this, and I'm like, I agree with you. I think he's probably a good guy. I don't know what makes him do what he is doing. But, if you're uncomfortable, you either need to address it or you need to just start distancing yourself, and just don't let his influence or I need to be his friend, affect you. I felt good that he came to talk to me and ask me about it. But at the same time, I had full confidence that he knew what was right. I think sometimes you just need to hear someone else say it. I'm still at, I think we're all like that. If you can think something, but if someone else agrees with you and says, yeah, I think it's like, okay, just that reassurance, sometimes all you need. So, just knowing that they can do that on their own.
How you would hope your children will look back on their experience growing up with their dad?
I hope they look back and realize all the positives. It's easy to focus on the negatives sometimes. And as a kid growing up, like I said, we didn't have much. We lived out in the middle of nowhere, in the country, and the house was run down. We were never hungry, but we were never like full, but it's, I look back now, it's like, I wouldn't want it to be any different. Just the stuff I got out of that, the value of knowing, the sacrifice my parents made, that kind of stuff. So I think, I look back at that for myself. For my kids, I mentioned they don't communicate a lot, but my middle one will text me. And the other day he sent a text and he said that I'm starting to appreciate all that you did for me and the time you spent. I wish I'd appreciated it earlier. And so that hits you. It's like, okay, you got they have to figure that out, and hopefully they figure that out, and hopefully that's what they remember. I mean, I had a good childhood, but it wasn't always a bed of roses. But I look back and I'm like, I look at the positive stuff. I think of the blessing and the things I got, and I don't look back. It's like, well, this is, I wish this, I wish that, So I'm hoping my kids will, be the same way. And that was just a glimpse into that. Okay, and I think my youngest understands that and and appreciates that. But just to hear that from your kid, especially the one that was probably the hardest, because my older one, while he may have distanced himself, he didn't shoot animosity at me either. He just didn't have anything to do with me. Or during the rough years, my middle son, it was pretty vocal, and he expressed how he felt, and I heard things through the grapevines and things he put on social media, and so stuff that as a dad stings. But then for him to come out the other end and realize, Dad wasn't so bad, and there was, he did so much for me that I understand that now.
That's where your advice with patience coming from.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we may not get it when we want it, but if, hopefully that's where it comes in, and it's like I said, I with that letter and with my perspective, it's like, I have to step back and have peace that I've done the best I can. Was I perfect? By no stretch. Did I make mistakes? Absolutely. But I did the best I could. And I felt like I wasn't a bad dad. That peace, and it's like, I've done everything I can. And now to see that kind of, you coming back, it's like, okay, we get it, Dad. And I think when they have their own kids, they'll understand, it helps to level that out a little bit too, where it's like, it's not as easy as you think, guys. So, when that happens, I think that could take it even to another level where, and we all hope that, our kids do better than we did, so I'm hoping that, the stuff they didn't like about me or that I did, maybe that they've learned, okay, I know not to do that, because I didn't like it when, whatever, I at least had some positive, and, whether the good stuff or the bad stuff, they can use that as they teach their kids.
What one or two or couple advice you would give to fathers who are listening this video right now, based on your experience?
Again, that patience, just step back, try to see things through their eyes, the whole walk in their shoes kind of thing. I don't know young fathers now may not have the same. I think my age group, your age group, I think that transition was harder because we went from a non-digital technology, whatever, to that, that was huge. Where today's parents starting out, that connection and that stuff is not foreign to them. I think that can make it easier, but don't try to conform them to be exactly like you. Be that, again, show them, tell them you love them, show them you love them, teach them, make sure they know you're there, and, have that positive influence and have that patience with them, and then let them be them. Give them that freedom. You can give kids at a very young age freedom to make decisions, and just if they understand that those decisions have consequences.
Age appropriate.
Yeah. Consequent, and so as I got older, I struggled with my middle son was very smart, and he could have probably been a straight A student. And, it was, looking back, and he won't, I don't think, deny that, he didn't do as good, just kind of to spite me and to, just prove a point, and just get by, and whatnot. Well, we had a battle of the wits one day, and I was like, you can do a whole lot better. I said, I've never asked you to get A's. I've just asked you to do the best you can do. And I said, just understand that, I only pay for your education once. So if you fail a class, you got to pay for it again. And when you go to college, you're on your own because I don't have the money to put you. So I said, there's scholarships, there's opportunities available to you. I said, you're not affecting me. It's not how I want it to be or how I hope it for you. But this is really, the consequences are yours. So I could have been the father that's like, you're not getting straight A's, you're not, buckle down, you're grounded, I'm going to take, whatever. I didn't do that. It's just like, dude, if you put as much effort into trying to do good as you try to do bad, it's not going to be as hard as you think it is. And, I had to let him find that out for himself. And he turned it around. He didn't graduate with, honors or anything, but he graduated enough to get the scholarships to the community college that were available to him. And it's like, hey, I'm happy for you.
Yes.
Like, you were capable. You did it. You made that work.
You earned it.
Not how I would have done it. I was the opposite. The study, always trying to get the A's. And it's like, not every kid's an A student. Not every, everybody's different. They're, so just let them understand that they're not you. and they're, you may not like that, and you may think, hey, I'm a great guy. Why wouldn't you want to be like me? But it's, and again, we're not doing it from a malicious or any kind of that kind of intent. It's just, that's who we are. So that's what we know. So it's hard for us to take that step back and say, I don't get the video games, or I don't get X, Y, Z, whatever. But that's who you are. And if it's not causing you any harm, or it's not something that, and again, those influences have to be age appropriate too, where I think it's important that they start you let them make certain decisions. And as they some may not be the decision you'd like them to make, but it's better than the alternative. It's like, hey, I know where my kid is. He's playing video games, but at least he's not, somewhere I don't know where he's at, doing drugs or drinking or doing whatever. I had to, think about, it's like, I know what they're doing. They're not trying to hide it from me. They're not going behind my back for stuff. And I think hopefully they respected that. I don't play video games, but hey, if you want to, and I don't get it, so I'm not going to pretend I understand it. But if that's what you guys are into, then cringingly step back and, let them forge their own path.
Do you have any advice for children in terms of their relationship with their fathers?
We're not as bad as you think we are. That's a harder one because, kids are so young. I mean, they're very impressionable. So you can have some key influence in that from a very, very young age where, you want them to look up to you. And the more that you can instill that positive respect and that positive, feedback, and just, they feed off that. They'll see that, like I said, let them make the decisions, and age appropriate. And sometimes, hey, don't touch the hot stove. Don't touch the hot stove. Well, as hard as it hurts as the parent, they touched the hot stove once, and it's like that sunk in a whole lot quicker than all the words I could ever say, because now they understand it. So obviously you don't want, bodily harm to them, but, when it happens, now they know. That's hot. Well, what's hot? Now I know, whatever. So, if you start that early and they see that, then hopefully the next time you say, don't do that, because they're going to say, oh, hopefully. The age-old joke, as parents, we know everything. As when they're little kids, they're superheroes. When they're teenagers, we know we're the dumbest people on earth. And when they're adults, oh, Dad wasn't so bad. They weren't so dumb after all. Because you have that, that pattern there. And if you could start training, starting that off earlier, the earlier the better. I think they see that you're there for them, and hopefully they'll come to you and ask questions instead of you having to go to them and tell them stuff.
If I can summarize the advice from Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
To fathers specifically, be patient. And to those who are watching, we don't know you, we don't know your story. It might be different situations. We don't talk about abusive relationship, about abusive father. But if it's not the case, trust the process. Trust fathers, trust your parents that they're doing their best. And with time, hopefully you will see that it was the case.
There really is no book.
Yes.
You just, and every child is different, so.
Every fatherhood experience.
Exactly.
Yes.
So.
And that's why we're recording these interviews, to show what a wide range of stories, personal stories and testimonies of fatherhood. Like you said, different opportunities, different experiences. Our fathers were different times, and again, different experience with their parents. To have this understanding how it might be difficult, but at the same time, yes, we need to learn each step of the way. That's why we're recording this interview with idea to share personal experience and share personal testimony without judging each other, but learning from each other. What I can do better as a father, what I can do better as a son to my father. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Sharing your personal story.
It's my pleasure.
I wish you to continue to grow in your relationship with your father.
Once a father, always a father.
I wish you to grow in your relationship with your boys and continue to be the best father you can for them. And good luck with your journey of fatherhood.
Thank you very much.